informative, and contains my opinion and understanding of the subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show. I'm Dr. Jaime Vona, and this is Dr. Anya Schultz. And today I think we have a pretty good thing going for today. We didn't really get to do like a pre-show talk about it, but we both read the paper that Bryan Kohberger. If anybody watched Dateline, which that's what everybody's talking about in the YouTube streets right now. So for those of you that saw Dateline, you saw that Bryan Kohberger, that the teacher he worked with at the school that he wasn't getting along with, that she wrote this paper. So her name is, how do you say that?
Probably Emily.
Oh, I like how that's spelled. Emily Pednault. Okay, there you go. I think you got it better than I did. So if you guys watch Dateline, you know that he was a TA, which we've known before Dateline, that he was a TA and that he was having a problem with the teacher that he was assigned to. So what we found out is that he wound up looking up one of her publications. So just real quick, when you go to get your doctorate degree, you do research. And in your research, sometimes you could do a research for publication. That's what I did. So I'm in the process right now of getting my dissertation. Well, my dissertation is published. It's just on a hold for 2 years, whatever. It's called an embargo. It's a whole system. Anyway, my point is that I read the paper, and so did Dr. Schultz. And I think what we found will be interesting to you. I actually don't know what Dr. Schultz found. I know what I found. I don't know what you found. But I think it'll be interesting in explaining Kohberger's thought process. We did hear on Dateline. I don't know, because you did watch it too, right? You're the one that told me about it, thank God. Okay. So on Dateline, they do say that he did not like that she didn't speak English very well, and that he would I don't know if they said mock her, I don't know. If anybody's in chat and you know different, oh my God, oh look, this girl has so many questions. Good, well you came to the right place because we have so many answers. So I think we're gonna find that Bryan Kohberger thought that he was smarter than her, which obviously, right, that's like his running theme, is that he's smarter than everybody. But I think we're gonna find that he thought he was smarter than her by looking up her research or something that she published. That was his way of seeing her thought process and how. So let's get into this real quick. So the name of, just in case anybody wants to look this up, it is open access, meaning that if you Google it, you can find a PDF of it for free. So not everything, some things you have to go through a university library. But this one is free and it's out there. And it's called Ted Bundy on the Malignant Being, an analysis of the justification, but I'm getting it out wrong. Discourse of a serial killer. All right. So this is a project in which they wanted to, and this is something that we don't always see. So one of the things in psychology that's like a big taboo is to diagnose somebody, stuff like that, right? When you've never met them. Ted Bundy, however, he did 2 really long interviews, and one was in I have it all written down. One was in 1981, and the other one is in 1989, right before he gets put down. I said put down because I don't know what to say on YouTube anymore. But look, this girl said he trashed her for struggling with some parts of English. Yes, that's what I also heard. Which makes me think that the Asian girl that he was friends with, that kind of liked him. I kind of, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I do not know this to be fact. I am 100% sure in my head now, I've never said that I thought this, but now I feel like I'm sure that he's not an incel. So I feel like he's different in the sense that he's not involuntarily celibate. He's voluntarily celibate. He can get girls. He just can't keep them or get the ones that he wants.
Yeah.
What do you think about that part real quick? Because that there is a connection between, I think, the teacher's inability to speak proper English to him, according to him, not according to me, and this friend that he met,
Hmm.
and her same thing at the time. She had just moved here, so she also had a heavy accent. So what do you think?
I agree with that. I think even too, if we look at all of the pictures that they found on his phone of women and things, they look very different than his friends. So I think that's why she ended up being safe this whole time, because it just didn't fit his fantasy.
I agree, but how weird is it though that
Yeah.
he, and it is my opinion, we don't know this to be true either, but how weird is it that he was the one that went in, or maybe she thinks so at least,
Hmm.
her key was missing from,
Hmm.
right, from their work, and then when she told him that the key was missing, apparently it just like reappeared a few hours later, and then
Yeah.
the very next day all of her stuff gets moved, and then she runs to him. Could you imagine?
I
Like,
think that's him playing mind games and seeing how far he can like take things a little bit prior to going through with anything. Like, let
one
me try it on a small scale.
100%, because he probably never thought, because if anybody was watching it, they say that she winds up, he backs off of her, like from her, and then she winds up like, she's like, oh no, like he's not interested in me type thing. And they use the word, she didn't think she was good enough. I
Hmm.
was like, girl, you are the one that was good enough. He wasn't good enough, right? So if she ever hears this, girl, you were the one that was too good for him. If it wasn't the other way around. But I do think that she didn't fit his ideal. And we'll talk about that as we go through this paper. Do you want to start out by telling people what's the difference between a malignant and a covert narcissist?
So I think, a lot of it just comes to how it's shown. All narcissism stems from the idea of not really having empathy, using people to their advantage, but the malignant is kind of not always in your face all the time. Well, the covert is not in your face.
Yes,
Uh,
and then malignant is more like the
you're
like oh
Yeah, like what I think we would normally see
yes,
for them, kind of
yes,
like happy go lucky, life of the party, your normal mundane type of thing, where the covert is a little bit shyer or does things incognito,
like
but
Chris,
still
like
has the same elements of like using people and putting people down, no empathy, that type
yeah.
of stuff.
Yes,
Mhm,
I totally agree. And then, so not every narcissist looks the same, in other words.
mhm,
And I think that Bryan Kohberger, and I've been saying this since day one, right, that he's a narcissist. At least I've been saying from the first day that I was 100% sure in my head that he was a narcissist. And again, this is, you guys, this is for educational purposes only. This is both of our opinions. We are not stating anything as fact. Neither one of us have met with Bryan Kohberger. However, just based on the things that we've been able to gather from the news, from reading some of the things, like I'm now watching some of the things that he was watching before, just to see, like, because I do believe that he tries to pull from different
mhm,
characters or people. So he pulls this from this one and this from this one. And it was
mhm.
almost like he was like piecing together his own serial killer type thing that he was going to be. Does that make sense to you?
Perfectly. Because
Yeah.
he probably, just knowing how we've talked about his adolescence and stuff, he had a hard idea knowing who he was. He had so many trials and tribulations. He went through so many identity things that I would assume that the same thing is going to happen in the process of becoming a serial killer as well. And just saying, like, I don't know what I will like. I don't know what feels good. So you kind of go maybe with bits and pieces. That's why he's done so much research on others, so.
So much research on others, absolutely. And I do think that there is something, and again, this is my opinion. I do think there's something to the fact that his mom um, was interested. Now, I don't want to say obsessed with. A lot of people are like, oh, his mom was obsessed with Bundy. I don't know if his mom was obsessed with Bundy. I do know that she thought enough of the case of Bundy and then putting him to death that she wrote an op-ed about it. So that I know. And she feels like, people shouldn't be the one that, tell you when your time is up. But at the same time, that's like what the person did that's getting put to death, right? So it's almost like, I guess she's saying an eye for an eye. She didn't like that. So I always wondered, like, is this his way too of being like, I'm even better than Ted Bundy? Like, Mom, wait until you see.
Maybe.
Like, I am so good at this. Like, you're going to be so proud. Like, I did not end up to be a loser. You think Ted Bundy was good? Like, wait till you meet, Bryan Kohberger.
And that's what a lot of the like professionals thought about his selfie after the fact, was that like he's looking in the mirror and be like, I told you I was going to be the best. I told you, that's what they're inferring anyway.
That the one that I think you're referring to too, that's Dr. Mercado, the one that I talk about sometimes. And I'll be like, that's the one that I'm talking about. So I think he did a great job in the interview. He does a really good job. He's got he's like very TV-esque.
Yeah.
Like he looks, you know what I mean? Like that Keith Morrison is that type of thing. All right, so let's go over this. So can you share the or try to share the paper?
I can.
So we had a little bit of technical difficulties, you guys, and Dr. Schultz is going to try to be the me. She's got this. I have 100% confidence.
Let's see.
If I can figure it out, you can figure it out.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Okay, awesome. And then so what we're going to do is we're going to put this up here, and we're just going to go through it, and we're going to see what I think, what Dr. Schultz thinks. As far as being antisocial or a sociopath, I do want to just clear up something real quick. So antisocial personality disorder is the name of the disorder. Sociopath or psychopath are social terms. So an antisocial would be the medical term, and then sociopath would be the social term. So I did want to bring that up. Also, it is my opinion. I don't know if you share the same opinion, but all people with antisocial personality disorder have narcissism, but not all narcissists are antisocial. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure if I fully agree, just because depending on what type of antisocial like characteristics we're talking about, they may just not give a shit about people, which to me doesn't lead to narcissism necessarily, but I definitely can see there being a connection often.
Yes. Okay. All right. I could deal with that. All right. So do we have this up? Does it? I don't see it on here.
Let me see. So it's up on my screen.
Oh, I have. Oh my gosh. I have to.
Can you see it?
Add to stage. Yeah. Duh. Okay. So there we go. All right. So here we go. So I have it printed out too. So I'm not really worried about like seeing it, but I don't know. Can you make it bigger, or do I have to do that?
I think you do, because I don't have anything.
I don't know what I just did. All right, so wait, let me see you guys.
It's bigger.
It's bigger?
If you're on the full screen of the live, then yes.
Okay, so go to the full screen of the live. And let me see, this might help too. Is that bigger?
No, that feels smaller.
Okay. Why don't I?
But I think you can read it from just how it is.
Okay, good.
If they have it big on.
I'm going to be going over it to you guys, so we'll be able to tell you what it says as well. So nobody's going to miss anything. Okay, so let's start this out. So the introduction. So first we get into, Daniel's here from the Drunk Turkey Show. Thank you for supporting, Daniel. You're awesome. Daniel has been amazing. He's the one that hosts me sometimes on Friday nights, and he has been amazing. So thank you for being here. So, okay, so we're in the introduction. So Dr. Schultz and I went through, and we both have our own opinions and beliefs, and you guys are going to find that out today. So here, I guess the way that I would just give you guys a quick overview of what this instructor was doing. In the research, the instructor, and I think this is good, the instructor took into consideration that Ted Bundy was a sociopath or a psychopath. He had antisocial personality disorder, and that he was also a malignant narcissist, right? So if you're going to look at interviews that he did to do your research on, you have to kind of account for that a little bit, right? So if you're doing a case study, that might not be the best method for this type of research. So what she decided to do was, it would be like archival research too. And they talk about artifacts, just so that people know an artifact is just a tangible something that that has meaning. So in my research, I did my research on identity development. I did it on how digital messages, so social media, affects identity development, which is actually crazy now that I think about it, because that fits right into this case. I think a lot of what he did had to do with digital media. It had to do with, right? So like whether he was looking at the victims, no matter what he was doing, I do think social media or digital media plays a big role into this. Okay. So this woman goes ahead and tries to account for the fact that Ted Bundy is going to pose as a narcissist might, right? So she tries to account for that in her research. So again, what she does is she looks at two separate interviews. One's from 1981, so this was when he was still denying that he had anything to do with it. The other one is from 1989, and it's right before like after that, like he knew that he was going to the electric chair. I don't know how he was put to death. He might have lethal injection. I don't know, but they put him down. And I said they put him down like he's a dog, but he pretty much is. So they put him down. And right before that, he tried to say things like, if you guys hold off on this, I'll tell you about 30 more victims and da da da. So he kept trying to hold off or hold back information. And you'll see that there's like two different Teds here. So one is pre-admitting, the other one is post-admitting. All right. So do you think that, would you add anything to that?
The only other thing I would add is I think she took on an interesting point of view, because normally I would say if we are looking at serial killers and trying to understand them, we kind of go with the psychopathology mentality, where we're looking at all of these different things together and kind of piecing them together and being like, this is why they're a serial killer. I think she, taking this neutralization technique that she talks about, does the opposite. She basically states that we don't know enough about Ted Bundy in order to make an accurate psychopathology clarification of why he's a serial killer. So she instead wants to prove further that he is, based on the neutralization technique instead, which is kind of like psychopathology in reverse.
That was a really, really good way to describe that. So what she does is, so I have here, so the serial killer is constructed more narrowly than the multiple homicide offender. This offender commits a string. So this is how she identifies it. So what I've learned from listening to Dr. Mercado and stuff is that there's not, and I've also learned this in research. When you research something, it is very hard to get a bunch of researchers to agree on a definition of a term, because everybody wants their definition to be the one, or the one, their perception of the definition to be the one that everybody goes by. So I do think that serial killer falls under this. So as far as this particular paper, I see that she identifies a serial killer as an offender that commits a string of 4 or more homicides that spans a period of days, weeks, months, or even years. So that is on the one end. There's some people that think it's like 2 or more. I believe Dr. Mercado is somewhere in the middle. He says 3 or more. And again, there's a cooling off period. So that would be the big thing. And it makes me wonder if this was Kohberger's first time, or are we going to find other things too, right?
I think it was his first time. I think it was his first time, but I don't think it would have been his last time.
Oh, I don't either. So wait, you guys, she says that the victims, okay, ready for this one? So she's referring to serial killers, that their typical victims are white females that are either very young or very old. Think about that, right? So that makes room for Kaylee and Maddie and Xana and them, and also for Dr. Ramsland. And Dr. Ramsland, I'm not calling you old. I think they just mean mature here. I would consider myself mature as well. So I'm not saying you're old. But I couldn't believe that. But I don't think that he was attracted to Dr. Ramsland. I think if anything, he knew that he could get clout from her and get an identity from her. And I think that that's what the pull was there. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree as well. I mean, if we look at just the serial killers in general, most of them are middle-aged white males. So it makes sense that the demographic would also be similar on the opposite side of the spectrum. But again, because each one of them follows their own fantasy, there are certain people that have no issue, that they're not going to have issues with, and use them in a different way than having to recreate the fantasy and be the victim.
Mm-hmm. And I believe Bryan Kohberger had a big thought process as far as his fantasies. I definitely think he fantasized. The way that this paper goes, I was like, Anya, we need to go live on this because we both understand how research works and we both teach research methods. And the way this reads, you guys, I like highlighted the things that I felt like literally could have been written about, or something that you could see Kohberger looking up to, if you will. Did I say that right? Do you agree? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I kind of took the neutralization technique and applied it to Kohberger, and I think he almost fits every single one.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. So you applied them. So that's actually pretty interesting. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So let me tell people what that is. So the neutralization technique, let me just find it here. Okay, so okay, in research you often will find a theory that's already established. I did self-authorship theory, so it's an already established theory, and they just never looked at social media yet. So they've looked at all different identity development. So I found the gap in the research and I was like, I can't believe nobody did identity development and social media yet. So I jumped on that. So over here, she uses the neutralization technique. It's not her technique, but that's the theory that she uses to do her research on Ted Bundy through. So she does the research on him through the lens of this theory. So let me tell you guys what this is. So let's see. So the defining techniques of neutralization, she says, can benefit from an investigation of the presence of such techniques in situations as extreme as Bundy's horrific crimes, as opposed to the small scale criminals that this neutralization plan was made for. So this scale was made for what is it called? Like low level offenders. And she wanted to show that you could absolutely apply these exact same things into somebody as, horrific as Ted Bundy. So
I actually think they started this to look at adolescents' delinquent behaviors.
that's right. Good call. Good one. So they did. They looked at this for adolescents, and that was another thing. She wanted to show that it fit adults as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually agree. I didn't know much about this neutralization technique in general. There's so many different theories out there, you guys. But it all makes sense. All the parts of it are things that we do know. So first it says, I used a book entitled Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer, the death row interviews written by Michaud and Ainsworth, not to be confused with Mary Ainsworth, in 1989. So this is another thing. This was very old research. Wait, when was this written? I'll have to find when this was written. But you guys, I went as far as not only just reading this, but I read some of the references as well. So she looks at 28. Wait, let me say. There's 28 days from January 1980 to March 1981. That's what the book covers that she uses. So that's her first source. So what we're going to talk about first, she's going to pull excerpts of Bundy's actual words. So that's how she can rationalize or justify doing this type of research, if that makes sense. Because again, you can't just say, you're a psychopath. And she clearly had to, I'm trying to think of a academic word. She like she had to hold for, but that's not really something that you would say in society. Which is also, let me just say, the text that Bryan Kohberger sent to that girl about hiking, I don't think that was as awkward as other people did.
I didn't think it was either, actually.
No, you guys,
But I'm
yeah,
trying to think, like, as a college student, a young college student, would I have found it weird? I don't know, but I
yeah, but
didn't think it was
she
weird.
was also a doctor. Like she was a doctorate student as well. So, and I think it was things like he used punctuation and stuff. And but
Mhm.
if you ever get a text from me, I use punctuation too. Like sometimes my girls will be like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like apparently there's like code, I guess. But he used like an exclamation point. I do think it was a little bit weird that he said, "I think we were talking about hiking."
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was a little weird, but it could also be it was because he got more than one phone number that day, right? Which would
Mm,
go again in the
could be.
incel theory, and
Yep.
maybe he just wanted to be like, "Oh shit, I hope this is Anya" type thing, like,
Yeah.
"Hey Anya, I think we were talking about hiking," almost like, "Were you the one?" And again, that's where the socially awkward part comes in because there's a different way to figure out which girl this phone number belongs to. You could have been like, "Hey, what's up? It was great meeting you yesterday," and then just through conversation, like been like, "Okay, this is the one that does the hiking." Like I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like that is awkward, not necessarily the text message. At least for me, as a recent doctoral student. So I'm glad that it wasn't awkward for you either. With that being said, she uses Bundy's words in these two interviews, and she goes by this natural, what is it, neutralization.
Neutralization
Do
techniques.
you have the techniques, the five in front of you?
Yeah.
I wound up highlighting so much that I'm like, where the hell are the five things? But good, will you tell everybody the five?
Sure. So Sykes and Matza back in the 50s came up with this theory, and basically they're trying to understand these people who do it through these five classic techniques. The first technique is denial of responsibility, like the idea of it wasn't my fault. All right. So if we can pinpoint those types of things, and she goes and explains that for Bundy. And then
Are
denial
we
of
in case anybody's like trying to read it with us? Is that, or like, I don't know what page it's even on.
the second page, actually, right
All
under
right.
theoretical framework.
Okay. Are you able to scroll to the next page?
I think you're the one that has to do. Oh, nope.
I was
There
going
you
to say, oh, there
go.
you
Right
go.
there under theoretical framework.
Perfect. I say,
Yep.
guys. So
Um,
we're at the theoretical framework.
yep. So the first one was denial of responsibility. All right. So the offender kind of believes in external forces that cause their behavior, whether it's mental illness or upbringing or whatnot.
And we see that with narcissists too, right? It's
Yeah,
never their fault. It's
it's never
everybody
their
else's
fault.
fault. It's always somebody else's fault. It is never their fault.
Agreed. Number two is denial of injury. So they talk about the fact that no one was really hurt. And so their accident really caused actual harm, and then they kind of minimize it. So you'll see with Bundy later, he does this quite often, especially when he's like, maybe it wasn't about that. Maybe they're just an object and they didn't have a choice afterwards but to harm them, but that wasn't the main purpose, kind of.
Exactly. I agree with
Uh,
that.
yeah. And then the third one is denial of the victim, kind of they had it coming mentality. All right. So the victim is blamed for the offense itself, implying that they kind of deserved it. Like, whatever it may be. Why were you approaching me? Why were you wearing that outfit? Why, whatever, however you want to put it. The fourth one was condemnation of the condemners. So everyone's corrupt. Who are they to judge me? So they start to shift
Yeah.
blame to authorities or media or the justice system itself. Why didn't you find me in time? Why didn't you put these ideas into place so this wouldn't happen? Those types of things. And then the last one is appeal to higher loyalties. So I did it for a greater cause type of mentality. So, if they're trying to justify the offense because it is for the greater good, That would be
or like I did it, they were, they robbed people. So almost like,
yeah.
I like saved us all from this person type thing.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, so they were the five stages. What does she call them? Stages or just
Techniques. I
techniques?
think they just call them techniques.
Techniques. So there you go, techniques. So we're going to go over some of them and how she relates it to Ted Bundy, and then how we might relate it to Bryan Kohberger. Anybody in chat, just so you know, I had a little problem. I'm still having problems with my computer, so I'm on my iPad again, and I don't see the chat in the same way that I do when I'm on my computer. So afterwards I could go through and like read them. But I apologize. I'm not trying to ignore anybody. I just wanted to say that.
I'm looking at a couple too. Someone just asked to explain the second one again. The
Oh,
denial of
okay.
injury.
So, all right. So denial of injury. So this would be more like, nuh-uh. Like all I did was, like, okay, let's say somebody was strangling somebody, right? So this would be more like, no, like we were just like roughhousing. And so it's almost like I wasn't, I wasn't a perpetrator. I didn't like go in for like to hurt and do. So it's a way of denying that the injury was like caused by them, if you will, if that makes sense. Like it was an accident too. That could be another example of it. So it was accidental, right?
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of a difference between denial of responsibility and denial of, where was it?
Injury.
Condemnation of the condemner. Because when we said denial of responsibility, I was like, yeah, it's everybody else's fault, which is true, right? But specifically, denial of responsibility is going to be more, what do I have here?
More like if they had mental illness.
Yeah. So when the
their parents' fault.
yes, when somebody's victimless. So if nobody was hurt, that could be an example of that, right? Okay, so let's go on these neutralization techniques. There you go. Were first theorized to explain adolescence. So thank you for remembering that. But they realized that they could use this looking at Bundy. So let's go on to her methods. We don't have to get into too much. Pretty much just to sum up the methods, because this part is, I don't want to say the boring part, but it's the part that only researchers really get excited over. But pretty much she just explains, if you want to go to the next page, she just explains her research process and how she went into this doing a case study and how she decided during it, and this is actually very normal for things to change in research. So she decided that a case study might not be the best for this because she needed to account, that's the word I'm looking for. She needed to account for things that you would see with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And we're going to see that here. So for example, in the first group of excerpts that she chooses of his, he denies everything. He would never do such a thing. You know what I mean? Like he has a good family.
I think she also says that because he was a pathological liar, or they came to that conclusion, that they didn't know what was true or what not, because there's a lot of speculation that he was abused, but to the day of his death, he profoundly says that he came from a nice, good Christian home, had a great upbringing, was never abused.
Okay,
So,
but my thing, let's just assume, because from what I've heard, he was abused as well. But let's just assume, for whatever reason, he didn't perceive it as abuse. The fact that he grew up thinking that his mother was his sister is abuse, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I think it just shows why she didn't do the psychopathology in order, because she said, we don't have enough facts to say it was this, this, or this. So let's actually go off of what he did to his victims and how he sees it to explain his behavior.
And what they had in the reports, right? So what they found in investigations, and what they could then go back and match up and say, okay, well, we found that this was right, but like he was, this is off type thing. So I think she did a really good job. So I will say that. So that's pretty much her research process. She talks about triangulating her information. Triangulating the information would be like, I don't just think of that. Dr. Schultz thinks it, and so does Drunk Turkey Show. That's triangulation, right? So like three of us. And now triangulation, you could also add a fourth, fifth, and sixth. You could say we also use this research to back it up and another research. So it's just saying when you see the word triangulation, just know that multiple sources agreed upon whatever it is that's being triangulated, if you will. So she does talk about that. So then the focus of the present study was not concerned with finding the true nature of Ted Bundy by looking into every detail of his life. Instead, her approach looked at the discourse. The word discourse is just fancy for back and forth. So, bantering back and forth would be discourse. There's so much discourse in the United States, right? So we see discourse. Discourse isn't necessarily a bad thing. If we all agreed, that wouldn't be good either. So she says that approach looks into the discourse and words of Ted Bundy as a conveyor of intrinsic meaning about himself, his crimes, and his victims, whether this representation is accurate or not. The important thing here is, and I've said this on the Drunk Turkey Show, perception is reality, even when it's not real. So that's literally what she's saying here. She's saying whether this representation is accurate or not. So as long as it becomes somebody's reality, that, we have to treat it as if that's their reality, and even if it's not true. I think the example I gave you guys was like if two parents got divorced because dad spent all of our savings on hookers, and you have like a 9-year-old, you're probably not going to tell your 9-year-old that. At least I hope not. You're probably going to give them the whole like mommy and daddy are going to be friends and raise you together. And maybe they find out later in life, but not at 9. But if one Friday night that kid's hysterical crying and is like, I know you kicked dad out because I asked him to drive me and my friends to the movies too much. Like, no, kid, that is not why. Like, daddy was a Rolling Stone. This had nothing to do with him driving you and your friend. So instead you would just be like, oh my gosh, no, absolutely not. Dad loves driving you and your friends. Are you kidding? Like, so you would try to help change the kid's perception without obviously, traumatizing them with that information. Okay, so the next part I think we could jump to. So the next page, she literally goes into like in vivo and stuff. And in vivo is just, it's a tool that researchers use. This is where my ADHD and possible autism come handy. So for me, all of my peers, they did in vivo. I don't know if you did in vivo. I got permission not to use in vivo. So I was my own, I did my own coding and theories and stuff. What I found is that in vivo is like something where it'll pick up when you use the word blonde, more than any other word in the whole thing. Like, so it picks up good on those things, but it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about that. It's like, okay, so I said that 150 times, but what does that mean? So I think there's like pros and cons to it, but she lets you know that she does use this to assist. And it could also be because she had a lot of data. I had a lot of data too, so I don't know. But I don't know. But we could even go on to the next page. So where it starts out at the bottom, discourse analysis and direction. So it says the basic idea is that Bundy's construction, so his thoughts of his hypothetical offender, okay? Even in its seemingly neutral and descriptive form, are important to his construction about his attributions of blame. So, how does he construct that porn, for example, is one of the things he'll wind up blaming, right? So how did he get to that point? So that's all that means. That was just fancy for that. So she does then say that Bundy's construction of his victims, of his crimes, and finally, that she's going to review the causes of it all according to him. This interested me because this is what Bryan Kohberger was interested in. He probably was excited to read this paper. It literally goes into Bundy, like what better criminal in his mind could he get the information about a victim, about the role, how they did it, what they were feeling, all of those things. Like, so to me, I feel like this must have really made Bryan Kohberger feel like he was able to identify with something, because wait do you see some of the things. So women as objects, let's do that. Objects of consumption. So his discourse constructs meaning around the role of his story. So young females in their 20s, okay, that was a big one. So young females in their 20s. So he doesn't necessarily say blondes or brunettes. And I actually don't, I know that there's a prototype and stuff like that, but I think for Kohberger, his prototype was, I have pictures. Too bad I can't pull them through. I have so many pictures. I should have sent them all to you so you could have pulled some up. But I'll make sure that when I go in the Drunk Turkey show that I give him all the pictures so he could pull them up. But if you look at all those pictures in Dateline that they found on his phone, the common theme that I found was that they were all young, they were all white, and they all had big breasts.
I thought most of them were blonde as well.
See, I've seen a lot of brunettes too, and even the girl that he gives his phone number to with the hiking.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like it was women that he. This was more about women that he couldn't get, that he wanted, more so than him being involuntarily celibate. I don't think he was. I think he was voluntarily celibate, but because that girl, the Asian girl, said that she liked him. So that was an opportunity right there if he was antisocial. Because one of the things that he looks up is, and I need to look this up, Daniel, you know what I'm thinking, telepathy. I remember in the thing, it says about prosocial behavior. Can somebody, I forget how he worded it, have prosocial, and I've been talking about prosocial versus antisocial behavior for so long, so that really interested me. Is there anything that interested you about any of that, or connecting the two, like Kohberger and Bundy, before we go into one of his excerpts?
No, I think they're very similar in that sense. I think what we're going to end up seeing, or the one thing that really, as I'm reading about the women, for me, because I don't counsel anymore, I really do more theory-based stuff. And so the first thing I was thinking about was like Melanie Klein and objects relations theory. I don't know why it kept popping in my head as I was doing this, which is my least favorite theory of all time, but for some reason I couldn't get away from it, because I almost think with his history of what we know or what we're missing as well, I'm thinking maybe something happened. We know we feel like he was out of place, didn't really get along with too many people when he was younger. So is there someone that he is like emulating from back in the day? Is it a mother thing that stems from, because I do feel like the parents treated him differently, but I don't know if we'll ever really find that out. So I'm wondering if, like, yes, he sees himself in Bundy, but it still relates back to this idea of when he was younger. And now
so
he's
seeing these things as validation of himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
either way, like stemming way back. Yep.
That's right. So in other words, he already had these feelings. So by reading something that Bundy said that he resonates with him, is almost like validation that I'm not the only one that thought that. So objectifying women, seeing women as images, that was a big one, right? So they both saw women as images. The first excerpt was from March 27th, 1981. This is Bundy's words, okay? And this is before he admits to doing anything. So he is still denying it, which is one of the techniques, right? So he's still in denial. So he says, we sent men, this is crazy. This is not my word, you guys. This is Ted Bundy's words. We sent men to Vietnam and they were all able to kill because the tactics taken by their leaders was to depersonalize the enemy. You're not killing a man, you're killing, and he says a slur, in Viet Cong, he says. Under those circumstances, oh my gosh, my paper.
Men kill very easily.
Can kill what does it say?
Men kill very easily.
Got you. For some reason, it's not on my paper at all. Certainly, the situation we're discussing does not have the legitimacy or atmosphere of war, and yet the same psychological mechanisms are used by a person who kills indiscriminately, except he's not killing a person, he's killing an image. So again, that could go into that whole prototype, right? So you keep killing the same person over and over and over again in these other people. So I think that this is an illustration, I agree with her, of dehumanizing the victim. By dehumanizing them, and like Kohberger says in his Tappa Talks, and we did a live on this, that he sees himself as a piece of meat and that he sees others as a piece of meat. That's one way. And he literally talks about depersonalization in his Tappa Talks. So this stuff must have validated some of his thought process, at least, why he was reading it, even though we know he doesn't really like the author.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right.
I thought Ted Bundy was highly insightful for trying to say he didn't do these things. I'm like, you know a little bit too well the psychological output of this particular person who did do it. I was like, Ted Bundy has also always fascinated me because of his approach on how he was very intelligent when it came to things. And I was like,
he was like the definition of a malignant narcissist.
Fully. And I think this is him thinking he was getting away with it, but let me help you find the killer.
So, but I also think, right, by talking about war, he's now talking about something that other people could relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to make his crimes relatable, which is just psychopathic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't think of anything more psychopathic. So then, okay, so we see there that he's doing the one where he's objectifying women. So it says that he idealized women as the source of his focus, a class not of women per se, but a class that has almost been created through the mythology of women and how they are used as objects. The objectification of his victims is clear from his discourse. And I agree with this. And I think that Bryan Kohberger also objectified women. And here they're pretty much talking about that it's a specific type of woman for them. So, it says like how they're used as objects. So this was his way. And they do the excerpt. Do you want to do this excerpt or do you want me to do it?
It's fine.
Because that's
I can do it.
Okay.
So it says, sure, we're talking about images. We're talking about anonymous, abstracted, living and breathing people. But the person, they were not known. They were just symbols. To a point, they were symbols. But once a certain point in the encounter has been crossed, they ceased being individuals and became, well, you could say problems. That's not the word either. Threats. Now, once a certain point in the encounter was passed, they ceased to have any symbolic value at all, and they ceased also to have, at that point, once they become flesh and blood, and once they ceased being an image or a dehumanized symbol, that's when the rational self, the normal self, would surface and react with fear and horror and so on.
Crazy, right? So, okay, so for people that are like, what the hell did they just say? He's pretty much here, he's using threats as being able to dehumanize them, but he also talks about possession. And I know Daniel's here from Drunk Turkey, and he was a cop, and possession's 9/10 of the law, right? So it's almost like I own you in a way, if that makes sense. So like you can like see through them almost. And that's another thing about narcissists that we usually see is that they often think that they're outsmarting everybody, but we see right through it. So that makes it, strange there. So he talks about property. I don't know if you want to go to the next page.
Yep.
Okay, so on this next page, he talks about having custody and control of property. I've been saying this from the beginning. I think Kohberger's crimes go back to power and control, or the lack thereof, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he goes from being this child that was chubby and that was, he felt like a nobody. He felt like a nerd. I think Howard Blum says that part, and I agreed with that part that he might have felt less than. So after he loses weight and stuff, and he comes back his junior year, he winds up being the bully, and that makes sense because he wants to make sure that even if he doesn't identify as one of the popular kids, he wanted to make sure that he was no longer identifying with the kids that were being bullied, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I read through the line. I think that's what Howard Bloom was trying to say. I could be wrong, though. I don't want to speak for him, so we could just ask him ourselves. But over here, again, we're looking at objectification and dehumanization of neutralization technique. So in effect, images cannot be hurt and objects cannot bleed or suffer. Images and objects um, are simply produced for the satisfaction of its consumer. So by making Kaylee and Maddie and Xana and all them, by making all of them objects in these pictures that he was in these social media things that he was following, a lot of people out there don't realize that a lot of times us moms will be like, watch what you put out there, and the kids are like, oh, no, no, no. But it's really real, and it's not because we're worried about what Anya's going to see on your page or what I'm going to see, but you could have somebody out there that has an entire fantasy about the things that you're putting out there that you have no idea about. So, and he clearly had fantasies, in my opinion, that he eventually acts on, just like Bundy did. You guys, I can't believe how many people are in here. Thank you so much, Drunk Turkey Show, Steelers fan, Extreme Blonde, all of you guys. I think I even saw Truth in here. Everybody's in here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you guys. Okay, so let's move to the next excerpt real quick. So you have to read the first sentence, though, because mine isn't there.
In the beginning, the act of killing?
It says the act for this person.
No. It says, in the beginning, the act of killing, we would not expect it to be the goal.
I was talking about excerpt for April 29th.
Oh, number 4. The act for this person, the act of, more often than not, the killing of the victim was done out of sort of, on the one hand, the act would be accomplished because of his perceived need to reduce the probability of detection. Another factor was that this was a means to an end, that is, of accomplishing ultimate possession of the victim, so to speak.
Again, power and control. And this is another thing. So he has a hell of a lot of insight for somebody who's denying these crimes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, oh, you're really good at this, buddy. So here we're talking, he justifies the killing of his victims to avoid getting caught. So this is another reason that I'm not sure that Bryan Kohberger ever saw Dylan. I think that in my opinion, he was looking down at the steps so that he didn't trip. Because what would be worse than tripping and leaving more evidence for somebody to pick up on? So, and if he had visual snow, if any of that's real, or he's got, problems with his peripheral and stuff, then you could see almost like him focusing, and again, this is my opinion, on like where he's walking more so than the fact that she had her door open. I do think that if she would have made one peep, that she would have been a goner. Do you think so?
No, I agree too. I think he was just, between the adrenaline, between all the other stuff that was happening. I almost think he was he like saw her but didn't see her. Thank God.
Yes, I see what you're saying. I see. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So excerpt 5, he received no pleasure from harming or causing pain to the person he attacked. He received absolutely no gratification from causing pain and did everything possible within reason, considering the unreasonableness of the situation, not to torture these individuals, at least not physically. You guys. And then she goes on, let me do the next one and then we'll talk about it. We still have to remember that the individual, at least not on a conscious level, so this is Bundy saying this, has no desire or implements no design with goal of terrorizing or torturing the person. And he ordinarily would not want to inflict any unnecessary violence or pain to the girl. You guys. If this is ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. This is his way of trying to assure us that I didn't do this. I couldn't. I'm a moral human being. I'm sure he actually, you have to put yourself in the mind of a narcissist or somebody with antisocial behavior to even understand this thought process. So he's giving this very detailed insight, but detaching himself from it, which is just amazing, the insight that he has, right?
I feel like the narcissism in him didn't want to be seen as a sadist or a masochist.
That's right.
Or anything like that, because it puts a whole different spin on his persona.
1,000,000,000%. So I think that the 3 crimes that he was accused of during this time that this all happened, they were very brutal. So of course, some of this could be his way of being like, I would never do that. I don't even think that the person that did that was trying to do that. You guys, this is bullshit. And he thinks that he's being manipulative and that that he's getting over on people, and he's definitely not. Do you want to add anything to that one?
Nope, fully agree.
Okay, so the next one, number 7, the act of killing the victim was just a necessity. Oh yeah, he would not linger or relish the killing, since it was only a means to an end to avoid detection. So again, he's saying, I had to do this. And then he goes on excerpt 8 to say, I think we could read a book about the Marquise de I don't know how to say that, and other people who take their victims in one form or another out of a desire to possess and would torture, humiliate, and terrorize them elaborately, something that would give them more powerful impression that they were in control. He uses the word power and control in this one. But with this person, we don't see that kind of act. So again, what great insight he has. But he says, but not this killer. We don't see that with this one. Not this guy. What did you get from that one? That's ridiculous.
No, I agree, because I think I think he is under the radar trying to validate why he did things that he did without saying it, because they do go off to talk about the fact that he was highly violent, inserted blunt objects. I think he almost decapitated one of the women at one point in time. And so they start to ask him about that. Like, well, what's the excuse for this then?
No, you're right. And it says it right there that the insertion of blunt objects in the vagina. So this is the thing. I always tell people, you're not going to tell a story. Let's say you had to make up a story right now. You're only going to use the things that you've ever seen or heard of in your head. So if you've never seen or heard of a wug, that's the word that they use in our book to tell us something with kids. But there's no such thing as a wug, right? But let's say we make it up. You project on that only what you know or what's in your thought process. So even if he, was trying to detach from this, it's still something that's in his thought process. Like it wouldn't occur to me, some of the things that he's making sure that he wants, everybody to know that he didn't do. Some of those things I wouldn't have even thought of. But if you're inserting blunt objects into the vagina of women, and they considered it extremely severe. I think he even went back and he had necrophilia, so he went back and slept with the corpses after they were decomposing. So I mean, he goes he does some heinous stuff. So the fact that he's trying to distance himself from it, that's all he's doing here. However, he's not very smart in the sense that he's pretty much projecting his thoughts onto this piece of paper without realizing. Does that make sense?
I think this is him also later trying to validate that he eventually is going to try and convince people that he has like multiple personalities, and that it was only the one that could have possibly have been doing this compared to the other. So I don't know whether this was also him trying to get his defense ready for maybe a plea of insanity rather than the death penalty, but he definitely is compartmentalizing on some asset here of
compartmentalization is something that that somebody like a serial killer would know would do, right? So and think about it, they could in one sense enact a fantasy and then in another sense go home and eat dinner with their family. Like they're two totally different things, and they're both two different extremes, but they could both be done in the same afternoon by this person, right? Okay, so let's go to the next one just for the sake of time and stuff. So number 9, the question to him is, what about the evidence? So this person does call him out. What about the evidence of mutilation, the suggestion of mutilation in some of the cases, the use of foreign objects, and that sort of thing? So this interviewer calls him out and he says, well, I think that assuming this personality was capable of, committing a whole spectrum of crimes, you'd expect that he would, in the course of this behavior, experience aberrations. They're going to perform some sort of aberration, which may not be significant of anything except just something spontaneous. So you guys are probably like, what the hell? Because I had to read that a few times. I was like, wait, what? And then I realized what he's saying here. So first of all, the author goes on to define what aberration is. So the choice for aberration is powerful at denying injury. So the definition of aberration indicates that it is a departure from what is normal, usual, or expected, typically one that is unwelcome. Tell me that doesn't fit here and Kohberger, right? But you got the fact that he's using big words, and if you look at the way that he speaks like very professional and stuff. I'll be the first to be like, what up, bitch? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not always professional. I'm Jamie too. Like, I'm a human as well. But I feel like here he's trying to come off as like, I'm the professional. Like, I'm going to be a lawyer, you guys. Like, you're so wrong about me. You know what I mean? Like, I only know this because I study these types of people type thing. But he didn't fool anybody, clearly. Did you want to? So it says, similarly in excerpt 10 that we just read, or no, we read 9. In 10, it says, why would he mutilate a young girl? So he answers with a question back. That's interesting. So why would he mutilate a young girl? So this is the thing. One of the victims at this time, there was only 3 victims that they knew about. And one of them, I believe, was like 12 or 13. Like she was
his
12.
last victim. Yeah.
So not only now does he not want to be seen as a mutilator and all these other things, but he doesn't want to be seen as a pedophile either. Right? And that would make him a pedophile.
Yeah.
Especially in his eyes, right? Yeah. So he's got to like get away from that. So on the next page, let's go to the next page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. All right. So the next page, the Ted Bundy says, it seems to me that kind of behavior would be an exception as opposed to the rule. So this is saying, if I do get found guilty of this, you guys, this was an exception. I'm not a pedophile. Like, I didn't even know she was 12. I thought she was 16. So this is, in my opinion, his way of laying that foundation so that if or when he is found guilty, that we could go back and look at it and be like, oh, this must have just been like, a one-off. What do you think about
it? I agree. I think because of the narcissism aspect, he wants people to see him in a certain way. So he's trying to find an excuse for this act and saying, listen, this would just be an exception. It doesn't have to be the rule. Sometimes people don't play by the rules. Sometimes things happen that have to be spontaneous. They were never meant to be that way. Because again, like you said, being a pedophile or being a necrophiliac or anything like that dictates a very certain type of person, and he doesn't want to be related to that person, even though he's done those deeds. And so let's find another excuse,
identity, right? So this goes back to identity as well, you guys. So this is who he is. This is his identity, but now he's trying to deny his true self, and he only wants to put forth his ideal self. But we all know that his ideal self is not real. Right. So in the next excerpt, and then he goes on to talk about what was it? So his victims were females. He indicated that the nature of his behaviors must not be understood as heterosexual issues. Okay. By removing meaning to the gender of his victims, he denies the sexual aggressions that took place. And the excerpt that they're talking about, Ted Bundy says this. It was channeled for some reason towards women, young women, and in a particular way. That does not mean that what he was suffering from was in fact a sexual problem or that he hated women. Really? What does it mean then, Ted? You tell us.
I will say this is reading this for the first time, because I've heard him say these things, but to read it and really try and understand, he has confused me a little bit about what he thinks his problem was.
I think he lacked an identity. I think that the person that he thought he was growing up he comes to find out that he wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? So it's
I
like,
feel like there has to be something else, whether it is a childhood thing or something, because
well,
I get you lacked an identity, but
didn't
you
his
found
stepdad,
one specific.
does anybody know in the chat too, didn't his stepdad, like, didn't his mom, well, his mom was a sister, so just in case anybody doesn't know that, he grows up
I bet
thinking
you
that,
that's where a lot of it.
I do too, you guys. So, and you could see why he would hate women for that, right? And his grandmom, or who he thinks is his mother,
Yeah.
played a role in that because she went along with that. Part
Women
of
are
it was,
liars. They play the victim. Well,
yeah.
let me show you how victimized you can be.
Yes, exactly what I'm trying to say. That's exactly it. Good job. That was awesome. Okay, so then to move on, he says, not in itself, the sexual act was not the the principal source of gratification. And then she says, the author, another way in which he denies the sexual component of his crimes by his absence of the use of the word rape in all but one instance when he talks about the nature of his crimes. Instead, he uses words like sexual conduct, sexual activity, sexual encounter, sexual needs, sexual condition, and even sexual act. But think about how different those words are than the R word, right? So, and again, he clearly did the R word, right? NM, then he did, I don't know, whatever, the rape. But by calling it a sexual encounter or sexual activity, this again pushes down the extremeness of his crimes.
Yeah. The sexual injury aspect that we were talking about before, this is him not putting injury to that and saying it was almost consensual.
Yes,
Almost
yes, yes.
looking at it as consensual rather than against one's will.
That's exactly right. So basically, he denies all of his stuff, okay, at this point. So she writes here, the theme of denial of injury, which is one of the techniques, is the one that changed the most over time in Bundy's discourse. And again, discourse, just in case you're just coming in, is a back and forth, right? So in this last interview, only a few hours before his execution, the context is set so that he just confessed to killing of 28 women in the previous days. His discourse presents acknowledgement of his actions with the use of phrases such as harming somebody or I'm responsible for that person's hurt, as opposed to I mutilated this person after I them and then I went back 3 days later and did it again when they were already not alive. So, right? What would you say about that same thing?
Yeah. Again, I think this is him trying to not be seen in a certain way. He's taking responsibility for the fact of, you know what? Yeah, I did do this, but it's not exactly what you think. So again, he's still trying to maintain some part of his innocent identity without being innocent.
You're so right. And she goes on to say, if such expressions might seem weak compared to the actual damage he caused, the denial of injury is attuned compared to his first interviews. This technique of neutralization is not consistently used by Bundy over time. So I guess after he gets caught or found guilty and stuff like that, right before he knows that there's nothing left for him, that he's leaving, this is his last time to speak. So this next excerpt, anything from this point forward, I believe it is, yes, is the new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, there's one more.
There's a couple from still 1981.
Yeah, so let me just read them real quick just so we can get through them. So 13 is, it is not so much, let me read it here, it's easier. He says, it is not so much that there are significant events in my boyhood, but the lack of things that took place was significant. So again, it's not about what happened to me, but what should have happened to me that didn't, is what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So the omission of important developments, I felt that I had developed intellectually, but not socially. That is very insightful, you guys. Maybe it was something that was programmed. Wait, this is now, okay. So he gets extremely insightful and then follows it up by like completely trying to wipe it away. So maybe it was something that was programmed by some kind of genetic thing. So you guys, if it's genetics, there's nothing I could do about it. I didn't make myself. My mom and dad did. So, you know what I mean? Like if it's a genetic thing, I had no control over that. And then in earlier schooling, it seemed like there was no problem in learning what the appropriate social behaviors were. It just seemed that I reached a wall. I wonder if Kohberger felt the same thing. So it wasn't necessarily that he didn't understand what was considered socially acceptable. It's just that eventually he hits a wall. And if you think about it, the girls that he gets the phone numbers from, he goes on and tries to talk to the one girl about hiking. And she says it had nothing to do with him, just by being busy and stuff. She just happened never to get around to texting with him again. But in his head, he could have taken that as rejection.
I think this sounds exactly like Kohberger, actually. Him having these exact same problems, because again, he's saying there was nothing wrong in my childhood, but it did seem like he lacked things, but nothing abusive or negative in that way. But then at the same time, have we seen that he's trying to use his autism or his mental disorder to say, you know, again, I couldn't even possibly do these things because I have issues, you know?
No, it would
Yeah.
like he would be putting it on that like second personality, if you will.
Mhm.
And you guys, I don't think he has autism. Do you think he has autism?
No, I don't.
So I just
I
wanted to
mean,
make that.
unless we're looking at the socially awkward aspect,
Yeah,
but,
but
you know,
that,
again,
in
you'd
my
be so
opinion,
high
that's
functioning that you cannot blame anything for that.
no. I think, and you guys, just in case anybody wants to know, I do think that Bryan Kohberger, in my opinion only, based on my facts and evidence that I've gathered, I think that he has antisocial personality disorder. I think he's a narcissist, so he has a narcissistic personality disorder. And in my opinion, he has traits of, so maybe not full-blown disorder, but definitely traits of obsessive compulsive personality disorder and schizoid personality disorder. I often get the question, what's the difference between obsessive compulsive personality disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder? Both of them have obsessions and compulsions. It's just that with OCD, what's fueling it is anxiety. That's not the same thing over here. On the personality disorder side, it's more rigidity and perfectionism and things of that nature. Would you agree with that, or do you want to add? Or
Nope, perfect.
oh, why, thank you. All right, well, then moving right along. So he goes on to then they ask him, would this second self, so he goes on to try to talk about, this wasn't me, this was my other personality, which we know isn't real, you guys. So they ask, would the second self or other self by this time be totally integrated into the person's being? And he says, the overexcited, over-aroused, driven, compulsive state that this person was in could in no way be integrated with what we characterize as moral, ethical, law-abiding part of the individual. He literally is telling us here about antisocial acts, right? Like this is
Yeah,
that is
he's definitely telling us about antisocial acts, but if you know anything about personality and personality disorders, there is a very big controversy about how, because they're some of the hardest for us to not diagnose, but to treat, because we actually do feel that it's integrated into who you are. And
I
so,
would back you by saying that it's even hard to diagnose. And part of the reason of
yeah,
that is because you guys, when like personality disorders are the only classification of disorders that are completely separated from the rest of the psychological disorders that you've ever heard of. And other than mental disability, like what's the word that they use? Do they still use the R word in the,
nah,
or do they just call it intellectual?
I would just say, yeah, intellectual disability of some sort, yeah.
But until recently, that was still in there. I was like, oh my God.
Mhm.
But anyway, so they're on two different scales. The difference is if I was depressed, you guys know me as being happy, energetic. So let's say I started going on drunk turkey and I'm like, just like this, or I'm like, yeah, or not. And like somebody might be like, yo, you okay? Like, what's going on? And I might even be like, I don't know. I just don't feel myself. So like you notice a difference. With a personality disorder, it starts from the beginning and continues. So think of it this way. If I were to tell you today that I think you have a personality disorder, you might say back to me, fuck you. No, I don't. You have a personality disorder. How dare you say I have a personality disorder? So it's not usually until somebody commits a crime and is court ordered to get an evaluation that a lot of these things, like borderline personality disorder, will often get diagnosed. But other than that, like antisocial and narcissistic, if you're a narcissist, you're not going to take on a disordered personality. Right?
No, because you're seen as the fun, outgoing, charismatic person a lot of the time for the malignant, where people love you until they don't. And then obviously they don't think they have a problem. And so again, why it's so hard to treat and why we feel that there is an integration of personality disorders to personality to, so him to say that there's a separate entity, it's just not what we believe anymore.
No, right? It's crazy. So he goes on to say that a certain amount of need of that of a malignant condition had been satisfied through the sexual release. And then he says a lot here. That driven force would, I have to do it over here. I don't know. Okay, so he says, yes. That driven force would recede somewhat, allowing the normal individual's mental mechanisms to again begin to take hold, to control the situation, or more so than previously. You'd expect a certain amount of debate, regret, as it were, that it was faced with a situation. And then the question after that is, would there be a period of internal debate? So in other words, would you go back and forth with like, do I do this? Do I don't do this? And he said, or they say, or would this happen fairly instantaneously? And he says it would vary depending on the strength of the normal self in its responses. Again, he's like taking away anything. It's like in other words, if my normal self says so, but if not, this abnormal being. He also says,
I think he's struggling with his like cognitive dissonance.
Yes, so let's explain what that is.
So cognitive dissonance is when we struggle between two sides of maybe the same coin or two sides of the opposite coin. It could be as simple as like, oh my gosh, I just don't know. Do I want Taco Bell or McDonald's for dinner? And I can't come up with an idea. And eventually I'm led to something. So a lot of serial killers will say that they battle this for themselves back and forth. And then something just triggers them to have a behavior. And now that behavior turns the cognitive dissonance into the cycle.
Yep, that was very well said. Even things like knowing that smoking causes lung cancer, but still smoking, that would be cognitive dissonance as well. Or like, let's say you love your dad, but you hate him because he always says he's going to show up on Saturday and never comes. That's cognitive dissonance. So again, it's just having two different thoughts about the same situation. He goes on to then make a metaphor, and he tries to say that his abnormal behavior is like a cancer. So again, just like the genetic thing, by being a cancer, and this is where I think like the brilliance of Ted Bundy is. This is where, he tries to again find something that you would normalize or that would be normal to you. So you might know somebody with cancer, right? Or in the beginning, he said something about war. We know what war is. So, people might not identify with being a sadist, but they can identify with, something like cancer. So I feel like this is manipulation.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. I think, again, he's trying to get people to see him in a light that is not as negative as this is going to be. And so if they can feel connected to him because, well, I've known somebody with cancer, I kind of get what you're saying. It must be difficult for you to feel this way. And so on and so on.
Takes over type thing.
He's again manipulating people to empathize for him, even though he has no empathy for anybody else.
Yes, you guys. So when he says things like about that regret and stuff, you almost made me forget, not you, but I almost forgot to say it. You just made me remember that. The thing is here, you guys, is that he doesn't have regret or he wouldn't have done it again, right? So there is no guilt. There's no guilt and remorse here. If anything, he might fantasize even harder to see like, how can I elaborate on the last experience, if you will, right?
Yeah.
He says, perhaps the only firm trend I ever ran across in the study of abnormal behavior was that the younger person, that a person that he or she was when they manifested abnormal behavior of a thought pattern, the more, this sounds like a word salad, the more likely it was that there was going to be a condition that would be lasting and permanent, a chronic disorder. Persons who suffer from such disorders in later years or a quick onset of a particular abnormal behavior pattern suffer acute conditions. And it seemed to make sense to me, so to him. And the literature is fairly consistent. So you guys, now not only is he saying that he feels this way, but he's saying that the literature, so the research backs him, that the younger it was that a person would develop these problems, that they are more likely, the higher the likelihood that they would continue with those problems unless treated without hope of some kind of remission. So in this case, he uses the word remission because remission goes with cancer. So he's literally trying to tell you that this type of behavior is different from that, and that it doesn't matter how you treat this if you don't get this right away. So there's this little girl, if you guys ever want to look it up, it's called Child of Rage, Beth, and she's abused as a child, but they get her help, and she goes on to be a therapist later on in life. I think what he's saying here, that there's actually research to support this, that, you know, if you don't get intervention, that it would just continue. I mean, that's just duh. Like, or
Yeah.
is that?
I actually look at this as, you know, because I've already said, like, obviously he has done his research. He knows his own condition. But I think that's the narcissism in him, is trying to explain it away, where it's like, listen, I've done this research. People agree with me. It is not me. It is just something that I have to do, but it's not me. I can show you the proof it's not me.
Yes, he's struggling with it, and it's something that he can't get into remission. And again, these are all words that somebody who has cancer or knows somebody of cancer might be able to identify with, which just shows how manipulative this man was. And then he says, and as the condition develops, so now he start like, look how how much insight he has for somebody who's denying everything, right? So as the condition develops and its purpose or its characteristics become more well defined, it begins to demand more of the attention and time of the individual. There's a certain amount of tension, struggle between normal personality and this psychopathological entity. So it's an entity now, right? So that's like, again,
not taking responsibility.
Yes, detaching from it. Should we go to the next page real quick? It's almost over, you guys. We have like 2 more pages left. Okay, so this next excerpt, let's go into this real quick. So now from this point forward, this is the second interview. So now he changes the metaphor from cancer to addiction. Okay, so take notice of that. So he changes from cancer to addiction. Again, you have to remember the time. So in 1981, I would be curious to go back and see how much, and I could look this up and figure it out, you know, was cancer something that was, you know what I mean? Whereas in 1989, did we talk more about addiction? So, and again, that would just play into the fact that he is so manipulative that he's literally using the troubles of the times in society in order to try to lay a framework for his bad doings. So the question is, and now you guys, this is right before he's being put like to the, you know, before they put him down. So this is January 23rd. Oh my God, my daughter's birthday. January 23rd, 1989. Okay. Question. You had gone about as far as you could go in your own fantasy life, okay, with printed material, photos, videos, etc. And then there was the urge to take the next step over to a physical event. And Ted says, once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as kind of an addiction, you look for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of material. Like in addiction, you keep craving something which is harder and gives you a greater sense of excitement until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. Again, he talks about that wall he hits. And that jumping off point where you begin to think maybe actually doing it will give you that which is just beyond reading about it and looking at it. I think if Kohberger didn't take this in, I don't know what else he did, because it's literally, right? Because he goes from bringing it from something that's online. And Kohberger, he battled an addiction and he got through that heroin addiction. So to him, addiction is something that he does identify with. So if he wasn't able to identify with the cancer metaphor, he definitely does to the addiction one. So now it's almost like, and again, I always, when we teach in class, I teach eating disorders and addictions together. And because a lot of the same things go on in the brain, I think he literally went from an eating disorder, so one addiction, to the heroin addiction, to this fantasy addiction. So it's not that he ever got better from an addiction. He just switched up his addiction to fit what he was feeling at that time.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, even the research could be an addiction. Him trying to find every single piece of information out about serial killers and being involved in criminology and constantly doing research that way. That in itself is an addiction. So I think, again, he kind of evolves the addiction into what we think it becomes.
Exactly. And then they ask, how long did you stay at that point before you actually assaulted someone? And these are the questions that Kohberger wanted to know. So Ted says, a couple of years. I was dealing with very strong inhibitions against criminal and violent behavior. So he's saying that he felt the inhibitions against antisocial behavior. Then he says, that had been conditioned and bred into me from my neighborhood environment, church, and schools. I knew it was wrong to think about it, and certainly to do it was wrong. I was on the edge, and the last vestiges of restraint are being tested constantly, and assailed through the kind of fantasy life that was fueled largely by pornography. So here again, he's trying to talk about this uncontrollability like that you would have in an addiction. I also did write, I don't know where it says it exactly, but it is on this page. He says later in the interview, he mentions a compulsion. Okay, so he talks about compulsions here, and he talks about obsession. So he's obsessing over these things, and then he has that compulsion to do it. Again, this fits more of obsessive compulsive personality disorder and less of obsessive compulsive disorder. And I think that if we could get people to see that, like maybe I need to make a short of that. And so why? Because there are people out there that are educated in psychology that might see obsessive compulsive disorder in Bryan Kohberger, not realizing that, the difference here would just be that it's not being fueled by anxiety. It's being fueled by antisocial and perfectionism and rigidity. So being rigid, stuff like that. Do you agree?
Yep.
Yeah,
Fully agree.
He's definitely not anxious.
No.
Okay. He also talks about, he says, I can only liken it to, and I don't want to over dramatize it. Like, are you kidding me? As being possessed by something so awful, like an alien. So again, by being possessed, that means I didn't do it. Somebody else. Chris Watts says that, you guys. If anybody follows the Watts case, Chris Watts, he's like, I don't know what happened. It's like an entity came over me and just grabbed my hands and I couldn't let go. And that's exactly what that reminded me of. So that obviously is something that, is not just for just Ted Bundy, I would say. He then, so excerpt 21, okay, she says that she wants to turn her attention to his discursive construction of the cause of the entity, which he was referring to, with preference for sexual violence. We saw in excerpt 19 that he identified pornography as playing a central role in the development of his behavior. Did I miss that? Oh, no, that's when he says he knew that it was wrong and that you shouldn't look at it. I also think we need to look at the days back then, you guys. We didn't have social media like how we do now. So you couldn't go to Pornhub and stuff. It wasn't like that. So you had to find a tape or go get a nudie magazine, things like that. So that in itself was probably a chase for a while. So that probably fueled his need for a little bit, but then so I do think that he has insight. So just like in addiction for him, he kept needing more and more and more. So I don't think that he's wrong in saying that. I think he's wrong in using that as a way to manipulate other people into trying to identify with that so that they can understand and maybe not see him as the monster that he is.
I thought who he chose for his last interview was highly manipulative in this brilliant type of way.
You guys, she's so right. So
he picked a
apparently
journalist from a Christian religious organization, this guy by the name of James Dobson. So he was Christian, ran a religious organization, and was a journalist for this organization. And the fact that you picked some of the most compassionate people in the world to tell your story to the last time, with the idea that it's an addiction in this, oh my God, the man's brilliant when it comes to playing his cards.
Oh my God, which is why girls walked his books back to his car.
Yeah.
Without thinking anything of it. So, but, and that I see is different than Bryan Kohberger in a way. Like, I don't think Bryan Kohberger has the same charm.
He doesn't have the same savvy as Ted Bundy does.
I agree.
His intellect, not to say that Bryan Kohberger isn't intellectual, because I think he has an area of intellect, but I think you have to be a lot smarter today than, Ted Bundy was on a different level for his time. I'm not sure if he'd be able to get away with the stuff today.
But I was going to say, do you think he would have been able to get away with that same stuff today? Or do you think...
I'm not sure. I mean, he definitely is more charismatic than Bryan. So...
that could have also been like in the very beginning, how you were saying with the Asian girl, that like he was like trying out little things here and there, knowing that she wasn't going to...
Yeah, he wasn't quite confident. I feel like Bundy was always confident and just progressed the confidence, where I think Kohberger had to really figure out what his confidence was, or still is trying to figure out what it is.
You guys, I think it all goes back. So no matter, there are differences. Not every, not all of them are the same, right? So I think it's important to definitely note that, but also to then be able to reduce it down to a lack of identity and the need for power and control. At least that's my opinion. That's where I'm seeing. So like in family therapy, my specialization's in marriage and family therapy. We were taught that when somebody comes in and they're fighting about, like a couple's fighting, it's not the fight that they're having that's the issue. You have to find out what's the underlying thing. So if I was like a doctor, that would be a symptom of something bigger. So whether, it's a fear of abandonment or whatever it is, but there's something bigger there, right? So here, I think the bigger thing is a lack of an identity, and then the need for power and control, that dominance, especially over women. Do you agree?
Facts. Yep.
All right. So then excerpt 21, real quick. I think we're at the end. We're almost there. So those of us who have been so influenced by violence in the media, particularly pornographic violence, and remember, you guys, he's speaking to the one reporter. A bunch of reporters reached out to him to get this interview, and he chose the Christian one purpose. And he talks about pornography, in my opinion, like this, as a way, because he knows that it goes against that Christianity. So he says, those of us who have been so influenced by violence in the media, particularly pornographic violence, are not some kind of inherent monsters. We are your sons and your husbands. Again, trying to identify. We grew up in regular families. Pornography can reach in and snatch a kid out of any house today. It snatched me out of my home 20 or 30 years ago. As diligent as my parents were, and they were diligent in protecting their children, and as good of a Christian home as we had, there was no protection against the kinds of influences that are loose in society, in a society that tolerates. And then the next page. Or is that it?
That was it.
That was it. All right. All right. So again, so now he's just trying to shift the responsibility away again. He wants to make sure that everybody knows that he came from a very good Christian home, that, this had to be like an addiction or like a genetic flaw type thing, or an entity other than him. And he thinks that he's getting over by doing it this way.
This is where I think the fifth neutralization technique comes in, the appeal to the higher loyalties. So even though he didn't do it for a greater cause, I think he's using his story now to say, listen, I'm telling you, I'm a good person, but I don't want this to happen to other people. So hear my words and spread the word that this could happen to anybody, no matter who you are. Oh my God.
Including your husbands and your sons and your neighbors. And so again, I'm glad that you pointed that out. So he's trying to say, like, keep them away from pornography. Had I not had, been introduced to pornography, this would have never happened. We know now that you can, like, anybody can. You guys, when the internet first came out, my dad was going to take me to Dick's Sporting Goods to get sneakers. So I was like, Dad, you have to see these sneakers. So I get on our computer and I typed in Dicks.com. Okay. It was not Dick's Sporting Goods. And my dad was right there. And I was like, oh my God. And I couldn't get it all. I couldn't get it all fast enough. So I guess my thing is that it's literally that easy. So we do see now in society where it is so easy to get, things like that obviously we would have, nobody would be alive.
Yeah.
If the theory's true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
He also says that it's perhaps not so inexplicable when you understand the position of the women in the United States. It's our fault now, women, as they are marketed and used to sell things, seen as objects of perfection. Okay. And what's that say?
Etc.
Okay, etc. So again, he's now trying to validate that the media also objectifies women, not just me type thing. That you guys are the ones that do it. It's not my fault.
Yeah. I almost feel like he's declaring the fact of, like, listen, I'm not the first person to objectify a woman. Society does this all the time. So why are you looking at me this way?
That's exactly right. And then just to sum it up, you guys, in her conclusion, she says, the analysis revealed that he used 4 techniques of neutralization. So there was 5 of them. She believes he used 4. That he used denial of the victim. He used denial of injury. He used denial of responsibility and condemnation of condemners to present justification for his behavior. They presented the techniques of neutralization to explain one's rationalization of engaging in criminal behavior. Again, they go into how it was meant for children or youth and for lower level criminals, but that she was able to apply it to somebody that was more mature in age and that was a high level offender. And still get the same type of result, which I think was very interesting. I also think it's interesting that she ends it with, if it is part of most serial killers' rationalization process to shift responsibility of their actions towards society, it also raises valid questions about patriarchal views and societal objectification of women. So what the reader tries to do here, and if anybody looks at the things that Kohberger was into, I think he did the whole Handmaid's Tale, which I still haven't seen. I need to watch that. But like he followed all of that stuff where like women were, seen as like second to men and stuff like that. So she's just saying that, and she literally says that if you're going to shift responsibility towards society, that would be antisocial. So that's pretty much what she's saying there. What do you think?
Yeah. I fully agree. I think there's definitely some themes there that are presented of him that is very similar to a lot of other people, especially Kohberger. I feel like he's always had an issue with women on some level. For what that issue is, I'm not 100% sure. But then obviously his pictures imply exploitation of some sort. And then, even with the killings themselves, I think the one guy just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but and is circumstantial to that. So hopefully,
So wait, somebody said, has seen the new interview with Bundy's brother, Rich? Nah, I need to watch that. All right. Daniel says, do you think BK calling his parents that morning was to lay the seed of manipulation in his parents' head to create doubt when they did become public in a similar manner? Absolutely. What do you think? Yep. Because again, he talked to his parents at 6 a.m. So think about it, you guys, that compartmentalization, that he was just able to commit this crime and then call home like nothing ever happened, right?
A lot of serial killers do. I mean, some of the most famous have full-fledged lives that they lead. And then it comes to, you know, if we look at Israel Keys, who's one of the most recent serial killers of the last 2 decades, he had a child, a girlfriend that he lived with, he owned a business. No one had any idea because everybody loved him. And he wasn't even narcissistic in that manner.
Well, the BK killer, what about him? He was like the preacher or the, you know, the guy that
but I think that's where the manipulation comes in. Just because we say the word antisocial doesn't mean that they're actually antisocial. You know, like,
oh yes, you guys. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Antisocial does not mean that it's not social anxiety.
Yeah.
Yes. So that would be
you don't know how to engage with people correctly. And so you manipulate, you don't care about them, no empathy, you know, you are deceitful, you know, and a loner normally. But
yeah, I need to find out on Dateline what he looked up, but he said, can something be pro-social? I have to find out. If anybody,
I do remember him saying that.
If anybody remembers what it is, let me know.
I really hope that they find him guilty.
Oh, me too.
I'm so nervous about that, actually, because I feel like things are so circumstantial, but so coincidental at the same time.
I think that they have plenty of, I think they have plenty. I think when you see his car going up and down the street, oh, this is one thing that I did want to say that I think was a little bit different, but I'm also going to go over some of the stuff when I go on Daniel's show too. But I don't know that there was as much of an inner struggle as some might think. So some might think that because he drove around so much, I think he was literally just waiting for them to go to bed.
Or like come home. Remember, it was a late night that night.
Or come home. So, exactly. Like, I don't think it was in trouble.
Yeah,
I don't think it was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like, he was doing it.
Both. Because if this was his first kill, I would imagine that there is some sort of struggle, but it seems like he had some really good planning done.
Thing before he even went there, like he already had the knife and stuff.
Yeah, the intent was already there. I agree with that.
You're saying, but okay, and then in his we went over his song. Remember, he said that he felt like a criminal, but where's his record? So that's kind of like that same thing. Like he felt like he was that part. Now he just had to do the actual.
Yeah, like a self-serving bias type.
Okay. So you guys, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all these, but I will. Oh my God, somebody did bring up. Oh, Truth brought up Israel Keys. He snatched Samantha from Common Ground Coffee Shop. That's right. Let's see what else we have here.
That's why he got caught, because he got impulsive. But until that part,
it's the ego that, yes, it's always the ego that messes them up. Always.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. Now we know the search BK so much. Yes, he did search it for himself. What are your thoughts on his possible alibi being the location where Joyce Leppage's body was found and who some believe was Bundy's first victim? Oh my God, Truth said that before. Truth brought that up before. I don't know. I have to look into it. Truth, you have to school me in it after, because I don't know as much about it as I should. And then Daniel, I'll let you know after I know more about it, because I don't know if you know anything about it.
No.
Okay, so I'm just saying. So, somebody, Extreme Blonde, told Daniel that they didn't see that as a coincidence. Everyone also needs to look at Bundy's first known crime, Linda Healy. The similarities to the Idaho case is crazy. Oh, you guys, I need to look this up.
Look it up.
Could we link the article to the description? Can you copy and paste the link of this?
Yeah.
I will put it in the description as well. When we're done on here, I'll go back because I have to add a thumbnail anyway to YouTube. We literally came on here last minute because of a problem I was having again with my computer.
I'm going to do it in the private chat, and then you can move it over to the public one.
Gotcha.
Because it's making me sign in and do all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. All right, hold on. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it in the chat right now, you guys, but in a little bit, I'll go back in and I'll put it actually in the description. That was a good idea, whoever said that. All right, here we go. Come on. All right, there we go. Send. Oh my God, did I just repost it back in the...
Yep.
Straight A Stupid. Straight A Stupid. I just resent it back to Dr. Schultz. All right, hold on, here we go. Now I'm sending it to everybody. So that is the link. And you guys, it's free. You could just click on it. It'll take you right to it. It's a PDF. But again, I will also put it in the description tab. I obviously am never getting through all of these comments. However, when we get off of here, I will personally go through and answer anything that I didn't get to. Any closing thoughts?
No.
Nope. I think this was a good live. I think it was good to go over, because I think this is the stuff that people have to understand, that even if Kohberger or any criminology student, these are the things that they are reading. You know what I mean? So some of his searches, like if he searched for this paper, was it because he was trying to see what Bundy thought? Maybe. Was it something that, he wanted to get to know his teacher more? Maybe. So we really don't know until or unless he someday tells us.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting to now know what some of his Google searches were, so that we can look at those things to see what it was that he was taking in.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to, because, we learn by building off of other previous, information too. So it's pretty cool to see the link, and, even psychologically to kind of think of how serial killers are still developing and changing over time, and how much more evidence we can find to solidify our theories. So
this is a good one here. So, and don't worry, you don't have to apologize. Somebody said sorry for the typo. It's no big deal. Dr. Vona, also, Jell also asked about the coffee with the, oh yes. So Kohberger, he asked the cop, he's like, when this is all over, let's get some coffee. Apparently, Bloom said that another serial killer also did this. Again, him just taking from other people's identities to create his own. And unfortunately, the 4 victims, Kaylee, Maddie, Zan, and Ethan, those 4 victims, unfortunately, lost their lives to give this piece of crap an identity. That just sucks so bad. So that's even more of a reason why we all need to stay on top of this and see it through. Oh, wait, Dr. Anya, can you address what? Hold on. The professor he had issues with was a man. You know what, you guys? It says on here, Emil, but I don't know. What did we say?
He worked with her as well. So I don't know if that was who he was TAing for. But I thought I had read that he worked with her. She was at the university, things like that.
Okay, so truth, I guess 2 things could be true at the same time. So he was going there as a student and as a TA. So he could have either been been his teacher, or could have been the person that he was working with in the classroom. So I apologize if I stated it wrong, and I will look into it. But on Dateline, the reason I wanted to look into this was because it said that the teacher, that he would say things about her. Yeah, and that he would make comments and jokes about her and stuff like that. But it could be that was his teacher. It could be. And that it wasn't, you know what I mean? But it was somebody that he worked with there. So there you go.
Yeah, familiar with her.
Yes. Let me see. I think that's it. All right, you guys. So thank you all. This went a little bit late. I apologize. Thank you all for joining us. And hopefully we have something good to talk about next time. So if anybody has any ideas, put it in the chat. Thank you all for stopping by. This has been the most successful live that we've had. It's obviously not because we're both so beautiful. It's probably more because Drunk Turkey Show put it in his Discord and told everybody to come over here. And I appreciate you and Steelers fan and all of you guys very much for doing that for me. I will never forget that. I promise. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great week. And I'll see you on the Drunk Turkey Show, all of you, pretty soon, okay? And I'm going to come there with some good things, you guys. I got some things working in the background. I wasn't ready for tonight, but it will be ready for when I go on there. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Please like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed this so that I can continue to bring you content. Thank you so much.